It's Friday. That means it's time for the Morning Pitt Mailbag. We take questions from the Pitt fans on Panther-Lair.com, the Between Fifth and Forbes message board. Take your questions about everything, and we got some great questions this week. I feel like I say that every week that we have great questions, but we really do have some great questions this week. Not just about transfer portal stuff and coaching changes, but about the current roster, run pass distribution, lots of things like that. So let's dive into it right here on the Morning Pitt Mailbag on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. It's Friday. It's the Morning Pit. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak. The website is Panther-Lair.com. Any other declarative statements that I can make to get this thing started? That was good, right? It's Friday. It's the Morning Pit. It's youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. I'm Chris Peak. It's Panther-Lair.com. This is the mailbag. I take your questions. You ask the questions. I answer as many as I can or as many as I want to. You like this video. You subscribe to youtube.com/Panther. YouTube/ I got too hung up on the imperative and declarative statements there. youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. That's where we put all of our Pitt video content, whether it's these daily morning Pitt videos Monday through Friday, our weekly live stream that we do every Wednesday night at 8 o'clock. We did that with Jim Hammett 2 nights ago. That was a lot of fun. We always look forward to doing those. Or post-game shows that we do. We're going to have a live post-game show tomorrow after the Pitt-Louisville game, so you can look forward to that. We'll start pretty much when the game ends, and then we'll go live until about 3 o'clock. Take your comments and questions on the game, what you thought about Pitt-Louisville. It better be a win for Pitt. That is a must-win game. As much as anything this year is going to be a must-win game, that's a must-win game, because if you lose that one, boy howdy, are you in a lot of trouble. But they're not there yet. They're not in a lot of trouble yet. They're just in some trouble, but not a lot of trouble. So avoid that loss, and you can keep yourself out of a lot of trouble. Of course, we'll be breaking down the game and talking about it right here on the website at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com is the place we'll have all the coverage leading up to the game, the matchup preview, our staff picks, and everything else. Of course, the game thread on our center court at the Pete message board, where all the Pitt basketball fans gather to talk about Pitt hoops. So tune in for that, and then when the game ends, we'll be here on youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com with a live post-game show to break it all down. So make sure you tune in for that. If you're worried that you're going to miss it, click that subscribe button, turn on your notifications. You'll get an alert sent to your phone every time we go live, so you don't miss any of our Pitt video content. All right, let's jump into the mailbag. It's always fun. We got great questions this week. I'm excited to dive into these, get as many as we can. Chad Papp starts us off and says, opening day against Kent State, is the number of offensive and defensive starters who transferred in the previous cycle over or under 5.5? This is an interesting question. I think I say this every now and then. I like to do the mailbag fresh, just read the question and respond to it right away. But usually I'll look at the questions before we start. And maybe you would say, like, of course, idiot, why wouldn't you do some prep work for this instead of just flying off the top of your head? But I like to have it, I don't know, I like to be a little bit fresh on it. But I do like to look at the questions in case there's anything I need to think about ahead of time or plan out or research or anything like that. And so this question about starters over or under 5.5 coming out of the transfer portal is really interesting to me, because I kind of come in at under, but just ever so slightly, only a little bit under, maybe like 5. Like, I think there's going to be at least one starter on the offensive line who comes out of the transfer portal. I think there's going to be at least one starter on the defensive line who comes out of the transfer portal. I think there's going to be a starter at cornerback who comes out of the transfer portal. And I think there's probably a pretty decent chance there's a starter at linebacker who comes out of the transfer portal. And that would be put him at 4 right there. It would not surprise me in the least to see another offensive line starter coming out of the portal this offseason, or another defensive line starter coming out of the portal this offseason. I don't know if they'll have both. It actually wouldn't shock me. But if they got that, if they had 2 starters on the O-line, 2 on the D-line, 1 at linebacker and 1 at corner, that's 6, and we would go over. I think it's going to be 5. I think they're going to go under. And so let's say 3 starters between the 2 lines combined. I don't know, because I can really talk myself into Nick James and Nate Matlack both starting on the defensive line for Pitt this year. James at defensive tackle, Matlack as a redshirt senior or senior starting at defensive end opposite Dayon Hayes. I could talk myself into that. I can definitely talk myself into Tamon Lynham starting at corner. So that's 3 that I don't have a hard time with. I can definitely talk myself into at least 1 starter on the offensive line, if not 2. And so now we're up to 5. And if a guy like Key Thompson, the linebacker from Ohio, comes in and wins a starting job, if he ends up going to Pitt, then then you're going over. I could easily see it being over on that 5.5 number. I'm gonna say under just because I don't want to. I don't know. It just sort of feels like it'll be 5 and not 6. So, of course, we're not even touching the quarterback situation, the quarterback position. We'll see what happens there. Atwood409 asks, is Bub Carrington on Pitt's roster next year? I mean, that's a $1 million question in a lot of ways. Excuse me. I cracked myself up so much on that I got a hiccup out of it. That's a big question. I don't know. I don't know, and it has nothing to do with Bub. It has everything to do with college sports in the world of 2024. I think if he keeps playing at a really high level, he could try the NBA or some other pro route. I think if he plays at a high-ish level, but not quite as not quite the level of going to the NBA and being a lottery pick, then I think there's a possibility of him going into the transfer portal. I think that's there's 3 outcomes, right? There's 3 possibilities. 1, he tries for the NBA or a pro route. 2, he transfers, or 3, he stays at Pitt. And I don't know if you weigh all of those possibilities equally. You go 33 1/3% on each of them. I don't know if you weigh it a little bit heavier towards staying or a little bit heavier toward the NBA or however you want to weigh it. But I don't think there's any one of those 3. And this is just based on my own perception and thoughts on it. Not based on Bub didn't text me just now. Other people did, but Bub didn't text me just now and say that, hey, I'm planning on doing this or I'm planning on doing that. But I think when you look at it, like I don't think you can say any one of those 3 options is a 65% favorite. It's too hard to say that a guy having a successful freshman season, a guard who can play like he can, it's too hard to say that he's not going to get, drawn in by the NBA or the pro route. And it's too hard to say that he's not going to be pursued by other schools if he decides to not go to the pros, if he decides to stay in college. I can't rule out him coming back to Pitt, but if you ask me, I'm not going to even do a gun to my head answer to it because I just don't know. But it feels, and I'm actually writing about this in the 321 column for today, that'll come out in a couple hours, about how, it's 2024. And there might have been a time, and Jim and I talked about this on Wednesday night on the live show, there might have been a time a decade ago where a year like this, you would look at it and say, all right, it's okay, you got these young guards and they're going to keep growing and progressing and they'll be much better for next year. And so even if this year has some struggles, even if they only win 17 or 18 games or whatever it is, they're going to be much better for it next year. And so everything should just be signs of encouragement and positive signs when you see these guys grow and develop and improve. But you can't count on that anymore. I don't think particularly in basketball, I don't think you can count on having anybody back. You really can't. It's just, it's so up in the air. And so you need to win now with the guys you have. And then when the offseason hits, you hope you can bring as many of them back that you want, as possible. And then, getting distracted by text messages and direct messages and things like that again. I need to just turn my turn my phone off. I apologize for that. I should be better about this, but who knows? Maybe we'll have breaking news or something like that, right? I don't know. I don't know what anybody's going to do next year. I really don't. H2P from NYC says, what do you think happens with Derek Davis? He's an athletic freak, but the running back room is crowded. Is there a chance he moves back to defense, such as corner, since that position group is lacking? Is there a chance he transfers out? I think he would need to graduate in order to transfer and play somewhere right away. I don't see him moving back to defense. I really don't think the Pitt staff was sold on him for defense. I think they were willing to take him almost exclusively as a running back. I definitely don't think they would move him to corner. If he would move to any position on defense, it would probably be linebacker would be my guess. Maybe safety. I don't see him playing corner. I think his best chance at Pitt is going to be at running back. And I'd like to see him get some opportunities. I mean, I think he's got great speed, straight line speed. And I think, at least get a look. He'll be one of the older players in the room next year when you've got, Rodney Hammond, Desmond Reed transferring in, and then Davis. Davis will be old. Davis is the second oldest. I mean, unless you count Daniel Carter, then he's the third oldest. But he's veteran. He's got experience. He's been around. So you'd like to see him. I'd like to see him get a shot. Not necessarily 30 carries, but I'd like to see if he can make some plays. I can't say second year in the offense, but second year at Pitt, first year learning this offense, maybe he can make some things happen. Maybe Cade Bell can find some ways to use his speed and make some plays. I think he's the kind of guy, if you can get him in space, he could probably take off and get you some big chunks. And Cade Bell, unlike every other offensive coordinator, likes to get their guys in space, right? I think that's what everybody likes to do, is get their playmakers the ball in space. Well, I think they'd like to get – I think it'd be interesting to see what could happen if you got Derek Davis the ball in space. Corner of Forbes in fifth says, keeping in mind the recent success of Pitt's Olympic sports programs, who would you consider to be the Mount Rushmore of Pitt sports head coaches all time? Huh. I mean, like, you could make a Mount Rushmore just of Pitt football coaches. Yeah, honestly, with like Pop Warner, Jock Sutherland, Johnny Majors, and Jackie Sherrill. Maybe you want to make a case that Sherrill wasn't the head coach for long enough to justify it. But I mean, I think you can make a Mount Rushmore just with those four guys. If you pick one, I guess Sutherland would be the guy. I guess Jock Sutherland. If you're going to limit it to one coach per sport, right, that you can't have multiple football coaches or multiple basketball coaches, I would pick Sutherland. I'm inclined to put Dan Fisher on there, right? He's been, what, 3 straight Final Fours and building a program into something that's, it's one of the dominant programs nationally. I think if you make your program one of the most prominent, dominant, successful programs in the country, you deserve to probably be in that consideration. And it's very recent. I don't want to have recency bias here, but he's truly made Pitt into a powerhouse. And if you build a powerhouse, I'd say you deserve consideration for the Mount Rushmore. There's Alonzo Webb, the track and field coach, who's been at Pitt for almost 20 years. He's produced like 70 or 80 All-Americans. Kind of goes under the radar because I don't think track gets that much attention, but he's been around forever, so he's a possibility. Basketball-wise, I might pick Jamie Dixon. He had as much success here for as long as anybody else in the history of the program. I might pick him. It's just hard because, again, I think there are at least 3, if not 4 football coaches that would belong, you make a good case for with Warner, Sutherland, and Majors. And Jackie Sherrill had an incredible run of 11-1 seasons. The guy never lost. He just never got that national championship, so it's the one thing sort of missing from his resume. So, I don't know, maybe you go Sutherland, Majors, Fisher, and Dixon. I don't know. I'm not really sure what the, I'd have to think about it longer. I said I looked at these questions ahead of time, but I didn't really, I didn't put as much thought into that one as I could. Let me know your Mount Rushmore Pitt coaches all time. All time's a long time, and they have a lot of sports too. They have 19 sports over the course of 100 and some years. There's a lot of coaches to choose from, but you guys can go in the comments here or on the message board and tell me what who would be your Mount Rushmore of Pitt sports coaches, head coaches. Pittman 2003 says, if you had to guess, what is the total NIL compensation for the Pitt men's basketball team? For this year, it's not a little. I would say that. I mean, we're talking 7 figures. I would say that those guys are getting an NIL and maybe not on the low end of 7 figures. Not just barely crossing, jumping the hurdle into 7 figures, but clearing the hurdle and going a little bit further beyond that. I would say is my best educated guess, would probably be the way to put it. That I'm not entirely making that up. I think there's a decent chunk going to these guys in NIL, both in the guys that they retained, the guys that they brought in, and the guys that they brought in as transfers and recruits. So it's not coming cheap. 9-5 records don't come cheap, but they obviously need to improve, and not because of the NIL amount they got. They need to improve because they need to play better, because they should be better than they have been so far. Ski77 says, with so many questions about NIL and Alliance 412, can we get an interview with someone from Alliance 412, or maybe a special NIL mailbag edition with someone from Alliance 412? I would like to know why there are not more fundraisers, auctions, or giveaways, and whether they're not officially licensed to sell Pitt merchandise. Actually, it's funny you mentioned that about having somebody from Alliance 412 on the show. I'm working on that. I'm actually trying to work on that. I think the number one thing I see from Pitt fans when they talk about this on the message boards, the number one thing I see is people saying about outreach and about hearing from Alliance 412 and getting the message out and getting the message across. And so that is something I want to do, because I have a lot of questions too. And I think there are a lot of questions you would probably ask. You asked some of them there in that question. And I have some questions I'd like to ask that I think you'd be interested in hearing the answers to. So we're working on that. I'd like to get something put together, hopefully for next week. We thought there was a chance it might happen this week. Didn't quite pan out. So hopefully we can get something put together for next week. But I think that's a great idea, and it's a conversation we'd like to have. All right, Ski77 also asks, with more transfers coming in and already over the 85 scholarships, which positions can we expect to see players leaving? You start with the numbers right off the bat, right? You start with the numbers, and as it stands right now, if everybody comes back, all the all the returning players, all the players on the returning roster come back, and all the recruits make it in, and all the transfers make it in, they're going to be at 90 scholarship players, which obviously is well over the limit. That puts you 5 over where they need to be by the summer. Now, that's not an issue right now. 10 of those freshmen aren't going to get here until the summer, so you've got some leeway and some wiggle room where you don't have to get to 85 just quite yet. You're not in that crunch. But it does mean that they need at least 5 guys from the current, the returning roster to go. And whether they go now or most likely they go after the spring, you're going to need 5 guys to sort of vanish off of the scholarship roster just to get down to 85 with the transfers they already have committed and the recruits that they've already signed. Every additional transfer that they get, every additional guy they go to bring in, is going to be another one that you can add to that list of 5. So right now, they need 5 scholarship spots to come open. Every time they get another transfer, they're going to need another scholarship spot to come open. So you could do the math there, and it adds up rather quickly, and they're going to need more attrition. I don't like to speculate too much about who could be asked to leave or who might not come back or this kind of thing. I feel like that gets a little bit personal, but I do think you can look at the roster, go through 3rd-year players, 4th-year players, 5th-year players, and find the guys who aren't playing, the guys who aren't contributing, the guys who aren't in the 2 deep, let alone the starting lineup, and say, okay, are they really likely to come back after the spring when they realize that they're still not really going to crack any higher than 3rd team? If you're a 4th-year guy, chances are you graduated, or a 5th-year guy, you've graduated, you might go looking for a better option to play your final year of college football. So I think, rather than naming specific names, I think that's how I would look at it and say, well, you could probably look over the scholarship board and find some likely candidates to open those 5 spots at a minimum that you're going to need, and a number that will probably climb to 6 or 7 or 8 by the time we actually get to training camp in August. The Pit Boy asks, are we still getting assistant coach changes, and if not, why? I think they are. I think they still will. Coaches convention, I forget when it is. It might be happening right now. I have to look that up. Keep meaning to look that up, but I have forgotten to. The coaches convention, I think you would see it around there. I would imagine that would be a a time that Pat Narduzzi would make some moves, let the guys go to the coaches convention and maybe find a new job before, just sort of outright firing them. There will be change. I still believe there will be changes. Nothing's really changed on that front from my perspective, from what I can see it, from what I've heard. Alan McMurray says, how optimistic should we be, and are you that Pitt will have a nice bounce back season? Well, the great thing about that, Alan, is when you go 3-9, 6-6 is a bounce back season, right? If you set the bar low enough, it doesn't take that much to exceed expectations or exceed where you were a year ago. No, look, we talked before the Boston College game. We're like, look, this is how it's really not that difficult to win 6 games and get to a bowl. I think Pitt in 2024 will go back to a bowl game, and I think they'll exceed that. You can look at the schedule, you can look at returning rosters. I think they still have some areas where they're going to have to be better, but the number one place where they have to be better is the offense and the quarterback, and I think they will be. And I don't think it's guessing too much or assuming too much to say that they will be. I think they got a coordinator who should be able to call a better offense and design a better offense, and they should have better play at quarterback than what they had for almost half the season. I remember they spent 5 games last year with Phil Dracovic at quarterback and went 1-4 in that stretch. Like, they didn't give themselves a chance in those 4 FBS games where they had him at quarterback. And I don't mean to be rude about Phil Dracovic, but it was clear it wasn't working. And they spent 5 games total, 4 FBS games with him as the quarterback. And you see what the results were. So, right off the bat, when you spend almost half the season with a quarterback who just isn't really going to win you games, did you even really give yourself a chance? Was Pitt that bad last year? Were they a 3-win team? Yeah, they were a 3-win team because they finished with a record that was 3-9. I think they were better than that. They had the chance to be better than that. They should have been better than that. They just needed to make better decisions at quarterback. I think they'll make better decisions this year. I think they have better options to choose from this year, even though some of those guys, it's largely the same options they had a year ago. But I think they'll make better choices this year. And that alone will elevate them by at least a few wins, and I think a few other areas will take some steps forward, and you'll see them. Yeah, I think they'll have a bounce back season. I don't think they're going to go 3-9 again. I'd be shocked if they missed a bowl game. So mark that down on January 5th. I guaranteed Pitt's going to a bowl game next year. Guarantees are never a good thing, but I can guarantee you that this is the end of the week, though. I hope you had a great week, and I appreciate you watching these videos all week. They're a lot of fun to do, as always. I like sitting down and talking a little Pitt sports every morning with you. Don't forget, we'll have a live show tomorrow after the Louisville game ends. We will go live until 3 o'clock, so don't forget that. Make sure you tune in right here at youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. If you want to make sure you don't miss it, like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com. Get all the Pitt coverage at Panther-Lair.com, Panther-Lair.com, Pittsburgh.rivals.com. I hope you had a great week. I hope you have a great Friday and a great weekend. We'll talk to you tomorrow after the game, and then we'll be back at it right here on Monday morning, youtube.com/Panther-Lair.com.